The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Greater Indiana Clean Cities Biodiesel webinar. My name is Kaylee May. I'm the Events and Communications Coordinator for Greater Indiana Clean Cities. Thank you for joining us today as we learn more about fueling infrastructure for government fleets, best management practices, associated costs, and infrastructure requirements for transitioning to biodiesel in collaboration with our partners, the Indiana Soybean Alliance and the City of Fort Wayne. Before we begin, we have several housekeeping items to mention. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a link to the recording after today's session is completed. Second, you will be able to submit your questions to the chat box on your screen. After each presenter is finished, we've set aside time for you to ask your questions. All attendees are going to be in listen-only mode, so you'll have to use that chat box in order to engage with the speakers. And lastly, we will have a survey at the end of the webinar for you to complete. Please take the 2 minutes to provide feedback so that we continue to cover the topics that our stakeholders need. We have 3 speakers for you today. The first is Kerri Garvin, who is the Executive Director for the Greater Indiana Clean Cities Coalition. Second is Helena, Jette, who is the Biofuels Director at the Indiana Soybean Alliance. And last is Larry Campbell, the Director of Fleet Operations at the City of Fort Wayne. We have a full agenda today, and we'll do our best to stick to our timeline. After Kerri provides an overview of the Greater Indiana Clean Cities Coalition, Helena will give an overview of the Indiana Soybean Alliance and the programs and services that they offer to promote biodiesel in Indiana. Larry will then share why and how the City of Fort Wayne switched to biodiesel, along with the benefits and costs associated with transitioning a city fleet to biodiesel. To wrap up the webinar, Kerri will give a brief overview of an available biofuels infrastructure funding opportunity. Now I'll turn it over to Kerri, and she can tell you a little bit more about Greater Indiana Clean Cities.
Thank you, Kaylee, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today. I think this is our first biodiesel webinar we've done in quite some time, so I'm very excited about this. As Kaylee said, Greater Indiana is a Clean City Coalition. We focus on advancing communities with education and resources on alternative fuel vehicles and transportation. Our mission is to advance alternative domestic fuel transportation, including energy-efficient technologies across all sectors in Indiana. Next slide. We are a standalone nonprofit 501c3 organization serving 76 counties in the state. We work with public and private sector members. For 21 years, we have been assisting schools, cities, utilities, fueling companies, government agencies, universities, and other nonprofit organizations with their alternative fuel fleet projects. Greater Indiana has around 80 members or stakeholders that work with us on collaborative opportunities, whether it is for funding opportunities, infrastructure development, or fleet deployment. Together, we host educational and networking events, fostering opportunities for partnerships between fleets and industry providers. As you can see, we have several of our champion members listed today. We also have many leader and advocate stakeholders listed on our website. Their membership has helped fund our work to deploy alternative fuels and technologies throughout the state. Together, we're fueling the future of a Greater Indiana. Greater Indiana provides education and outreach events, alternative fuel infrastructure coordination, and planning, as well as grant writing services to many of our municipal members listed on this slide. Clean Cities overall focuses on 4 major activities represented by the nodes on the slide. For local and national partnerships, we help convene key community and business leaders to develop and implement projects, leverage resources, and address local barriers to the program's coalition. In addition, national partnerships leverage Clean Cities resources nationwide to engage with larger fleets and organizations. For information and education, Clean Cities develop data-driven tools to help consumers save money on fuel costs and help fleets understand their options for cost-effective alternatives. For technical and problem-solving assistance, we help local leaders address permitting and safety issues, technology shortfalls, and other project implementation barriers. For competitively awarded financial assistance, we use federal awards to provide funds that encourage an initial private sector match and long-term investment. This framework is bolstered by local support through designated Clean City coalitions like ours that have their finger on the pulse of local market conditions and priorities. Local coalitions such as Greater Indiana can tap national resources to provide unbiased information, tools, experts to address barriers and solve problems, and national partnerships with industry and large national fleets. Today's webinar features a presentation given by the Indiana Soybean Alliance. The Indiana Soybean Alliance serves Indiana soybean farmers by providing practical and applicable research into on-farm programs, educating consumers, and promoting new and expanding markets, including biofuels. Helena, Jette, the Indiana Soybean Alliance's Biofuels Director, will now lead the presentation for today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Kerri. I appreciate that introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today to attend. I'm happy to be here. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump right on in. Next slide, please. So Kerri mentioned just what is Indiana Soybean Alliance? Well, we're recognized by the U.S. Department of Ag as a qualified state soybean board, and we assist as a statewide organization that serves Indiana soybean farmers through our checkoff membership and policy programs. We work with our national organizations, United Soybean Board and the American Soybean Association, to help develop and create new demand for domestic and our export markets, along with our national policies. And in those markets with our soybean checkoffs, we do the research and promotion educational programs such as this webinar to increase awareness and to provide more value for our soybean farmers. Next slide, please. So what is biodiesel? Well, if you're not familiar with the product, biodiesel is an advanced biofuel that is renewable and biodegradable. It's a cleaner burning drop-in replacement to petroleum diesel fuel. In addition to vehicles, it can also be used in heating systems to warm buildings. It's primarily made from soybean oil, but also, as you can see here on the graph, it can also include animal fats, inedible corn oil, recycled cooking oil, and vegetable oils. And producers basically can create a high quality biodiesel to meet the customer specification from a variety of feedstocks. And so biodiesel, as you can see from this graph, it's starting to make its way up here and continues to have positive trends, which I'll speak on here later on in this presentation. But it's almost about a 3 billion gallon market that started out very, very much smaller, and it continues to grow. Next slide, please. So how this all impacts with our Indiana soybean farmers and soybean farmers in general is, we've got a large biodiesel plant here in Indiana, in Claypool, called Louis Dreyfus, and having that type of a biodiesel plant so close to our soybean farmers, it actually adds value as far as reduces the freight costs. It is basically in the backyard. And according to different Informer economics, this adds additional 63 cents per bushel. It also helps our soybean farmers with also in the livestock areas to decrease a lot of that soy protein meal prices. So these, just as biodiesel, it also impacts other areas of programs that we have in Indiana Soybean Alliance, including a positive impact towards our livestock department as well. So I like to make sure I just tie that in together as well on this one. So we'll go ahead and get to the next slide. Okay, so everyone on this call, I'm sure you're tired of hearing about the coronavirus. It's become just part of our everyday terminology now, including social distancing. So just fortunately, the diesel demand did not have quite the dramatic, I guess, loss in demand as the gasoline sector did. It probably was about a 20% drop, with April being the most harshest month, because that's where a lot of that stay-at-home orders had happened and could not really travel, and a lot of businesses weren't open. Well, fortunately, a lot of the semi-tractor trailers and on-road truckings that were delivering supplies to Costco's and Walmart's, working, with different Amazon trucks, those were still considered essential businesses, and so they were able to continue to get what the consumers needed to buy, and those necessities that you saw many get ran out of at the grocery stores. But it really wasn't a lack of demand on that front. It was more of just a supply inventory issue. And so as soon as that kind of caught up with those supply orders, those trucks were out on the road. So I'm very happy that that didn't impact this diesel market that as much. So go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So before you get into kind of the programs that Indiana Soybean Alliance helps with, I just like to show that biodiesel continues to increase as far as in the market. We've got, from a 2018 1 billion gallon market, and I mentioned now, we're up to about 3 billion gallons. There's some aggressive goals when it comes to increasing biodiesel in the market and renewable diesel. And so basically areas like California, you might be familiar, there's a lot of this low carbon focus and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And biodiesel is a huge winner in that area. And I know the next speaker is going to touch on that a bit more. And so this is really kind of calling the need to increase production, to increase capacity, which ultimately will benefit, the demand side for soybean oil. So that's a win, obviously, for our Indiana farmers. And so with also noting in the Northeast, the need for soybean oil towards just bioheat. That's been a big change up in the Northeast by heating, empowering homes to keep them warm, and using bioheat products that also include that soybean oil. Next slide, please. Just some visions that work very closely with some national organizations, National Biodiesel Board, and got the opportunity to travel with Kerri to this conference most recently before everything shut down. And they were very aggressive with their vision for the future, in that having biodiesel, renewable diesel, and renewable jet options for fuel is going to be on the rise. And they're looking at, by 2030, having this 3 billion gallon market go to 6 billion gallons, which would eliminate over 35 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent greenhouse gas emissions annually. And then eventually by 2050, goal is to have 15 billion gallons. Next slide, please. So how does Indiana Soybean Alliance help, and my role specifically when it comes to biodiesel? Well, expanding the use of the product and working with the fleet managers and the fuel retailers that provide this option to their consumers. We offer a newly created, probably about a year ago, a biodiesel match program. And basically those who are looking to promote installation, marketing to promote the use of biodiesel over B5, over a 5% blend that's preferred, will be sites like this. So as an example, I'll get to the next slide. This is a construction site pick. And this next slide is going to show one of the projects actually that benefited from the biodiesel match program. Worked with a group called Premier Energy down in Brownstown, Indiana. This was their just their grand opening of a new location that offers biodiesel, and had blends of B5 all the way up to B20, and was happy to work with this group in getting this project up and launched. And so just be thinking, if there's any projects similar to this of expanding that piece, or fleet managers that might be on the call, definitely want to make sure to contact Kerri and myself, and I'd be happy to help you expand the biodiesel options at your facility. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm getting to the end here before I get to the next speaker. So what are things that we're moving forward with? Happy that we've just sort of outlined some future opportunities and goals for our organization, and really looking towards to continue to engage in the retail and the co-op space, where it's this, the fuel supplier, getting that either on the farm, working with the retail, working with the fleets, on getting them engaged to turn the fleets over to biodiesel, working with influencers, those diesel mechanics and key associations to really provide also that technical support and sort of boots on the ground for things that come up around transitioning your fleet. And so I have this sticker on here. I know you'll get to see it again, but really excited to be able to collaborate with Larry Campbell and the Fort Wayne fleet municipality vehicles to work with showing how biodiesel is better, cleaner now. And so by maintaining those existing relationships and of course fostering new ones, the goal for myself and Indiana Soybean Alliance is to continue to increase that consumption in Indiana. So thank you so much for having me today. I think my next slide just has my contact information. I'm also very happy and proud to represent as the president for Greater Indiana and work with amazing colleagues like Larry, Kerri, and also Kaylee here, new to our team. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Helena. I know we're given a few minutes now to take some questions if you have them for Helena about the Indiana Soybean Alliance, about the program that she mentioned that helps fund some of the infrastructure projects. I've always been blown away at all the support you guys provide for your members. And how long have you guys been operating, by the way? Helena?
Sorry, I had myself on mute there. I want to, I would say, I don't want to give the specific year, but I want to say we've been better about 10, 15 years. I know we've got our corn organization as well, and I do get those dates twisted sometimes, Kerri, so maybe I won't put that on.
That's fine.
So I apologize, but I normally would know that.
I was giving people a chance to type in some questions, and I don't see, they're not popping up here, so you must have explained everything super well.
Oh, well, and if I didn't, and if somebody's shy, definitely just connect me with them, and I'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, could you possibly, are you seeing an increase of use of biodiesel in Indiana? Like, if so, like, where are you seeing this? Is it a particular industry, or, just what does that look like in Indiana right now?
Well, right now I'm focused for this next year on that moving forward slide of just building more relationships with the municipalities, working with Fort Wayne to provide the education and things I know that Larry's getting ready to dive into. But here, so I've actually been working with a group to request the freedom to operate information on where biodiesel stands for Indiana and how it can grow. And so right now, with the focus of the education and just the information on the fleet side, and looking to work with a lot of the fuel retailers in the truck stop sector that use B20 all the time, looking to just grow that awareness in Indiana, and then looking to potentially work with some, if there's incentives down the road that may come from some of these partnerships and relationships. So other states do offer things that help drive that gallon up, and get some incentives and things of that, or some credits towards that, then I'm very open for that as well. So it's still I'd say not two baby steps, Kerri. It's just I would love to be like some of the states who've really pushed forward in this sector, and I think Indiana is prime as being one of the top 5 soybean producer states in the country. That I'm just happy we're finally getting some traction to get biodiesel some more headwind and more opportunities to expand.
Sure. Yeah, me too. I think there's tremendous opportunity. So, well, thank you again for reviewing your organization and all the great things you guys are doing to help promote biodiesel. We are our Our next presenter is Larry Campbell. Larry is the Director of Fleet Operations for the City of Fort Wayne. Larry has been a leader in the use of alternative fuels and technologies, helping the City of Fort Wayne earn various recognition and awards for its fleet management and use of alternative fuels. He is also a long-standing member of our organization, Greater Indiana Clean Cities, serving on the board, I believe, for like 15 years or more now. He was recently recognized by his Clean City peers as an outstanding leader. I will now hand it over to Larry.
Thank you, Kerri, and great presentation, Helena. Thank you for joining us today. I do appreciate this. As you can see the slide about their biodiesel better and cleaner, and you know, we got to kind of believe in that, and we've been doing this since 2003, using B20 within our fleet. Next slide, please. For those of you who don't know where Fort Wayne is or much about Fort Wayne, but this is just a little bit about the size of Fort Wayne, and it's not one of the, it's the second largest city in the state of Indiana, but it's not the largest. When you go across the whole United States, we're like the 75th or somewhere in there. So we're a mid-sized state, or I mean city into this. We're known as the city of three rivers, and we're becoming well known for 100 our bike trails and paths of 120 miles of greenway. But then we also take care of this how many streets that we take care of, 1,450 linear miles of streets and 3,000 line miles. And I forget how many miles, and I need to find this out, of water main lines and sewer lines that we have to maintain too, which is probably a heck of a lot more than what's there listed into that. So, and that's part of our makeup of our fleet of that type of equipment that is running biodiesel. So next slide, please. And this gives you a little bit about the size of our fleet, and we're over 2,200, and it's a moving target as it goes through there. And so last year we drove over 9 million miles, and even with this coronavirus that's going on right now, it slowed us down a little while there for maybe a month, but it has really picked back up, and we'll probably surpass that this year with all of our projects that are going on. And so we use over 347,000 gallons of diesel fuel a year, which makes out to over 69,000 gallons of B100. And so that doesn't seem like a whole lot when you look at the big picture throughout of the 5 billion gallons that Alana had talked about. But every little bit helps into it, but it also helps into the environmental side of it. Next slide, please. And when I talk about that, what it does is reduces the carbon emissions by more than 50% compared to regular diesel fuel. And so making it the best liquid fuel and commercial available for a liquid fuel into it, for a diesel product or diesel engine into it. And the other side of it is it's domestic, okay, it's produced here in the United States, and it helps support our local workforce. Next slide, please. And when I say that, you know, we can literally say, as Alana talked about being homegrown, okay, biodiesel supports our local U.S. economy, but it also supports our farm-based products. And I came from a family of farmers, okay, and still got family in farming. So, you know, that helps support them and throughout that, and also creates U.S. manufacturing jobs and keeps it here in the United States. Next slide, please. In this, okay, why the city of Fort Wayne decided to use, as we discussed, of using an alternative fuel to reduce our emissions throughout our fleet or within our diesel fleet. And we had talked about CNG, LNG, and we looked at the cost of where we was going to have to go where our capital outlay needed to be. And when you look at B100 or biofuels or B20, you know, that was our easiest way of doing this and our cheapest way of doing it. So what we had done, okay, because it's a drop-in replacement for regular diesel fuel, and you don't have to do any modifications to the vehicles, and it's dispensed through your existing fuel stations currently in your fleet or currently in your city or wherever you're getting your fuel at, unless you're at another fueling site. But as Alana had talked about, there's more of those coming online too. So next slide, please. So as we moved into this biodiesel blends, the thing that we wanted to see is, and we started using this in 2003, or started experimenting in 2003 and went full bore in 2004. And we used this in we're using this in all of our diesel engines, okay? And we have currently 317 units of diesel engines in the city fleet. So, and that's just a list of type of equipment that we're running this in. One thing that, as we're talking about that type of equipment, that we have found that we don't want to put it into our generators that's running on diesel fuel, because the separation that it can cause within that tank of not running that vehicle daily or not running that vehicle, the usage is way down into it, and it will separate inside that tank unless you have a way of mixing that up. And we have several large generators throughout our filtration plants and even on our site. So if we lose power, that we're still running and can run full capacity onto it. The other thing that we ran into was in our large water pumps that we use when we're fighting floods and all that. And with 3 rivers, yes, we do get flooding. And so was making sure that we have additives into those, or if they would happen to have B20 into them, that we're cycling those engines so it doesn't separate or turn to what would they call, the technician call, a little snotty inside of the diesel tank. So those things is what we want to try to do and keep away from. Again, we talked about that's our average gallons a year, or 330,000. The one thing about the fuel cost, we did not see increase over our diesel fuel cost. And with our local provider, you know, they agreed with it that the B20 or the B100 that we're using will not be more than our diesel fuel, and we run a premium diesel fuel because we feel that we get a better fuel. It's the top of the line diesel fuel product going into it, and we get better fuel economy coming out of it. So again, we've been in that price agreement every year that is in that $2 mark for B20 that we run in our fleet into it. But this is just some of our greenhouse gas reductions used on the average of 330,000 gallons. And so you can see it's substantial each year in doing that. So it gives you an example of how much you can reduce your emissions throughout your fleet with just an easy product or changing out into it. But one thing's into this, next slide please. When you are speccing and changing into a B100, one thing to make sure that you're doing in this is making sure you're using the ASTM standards, okay? And that's been studied throughout for many years into this side of it, is coming up on the production. And we made sure that we put this in our specs when we went out to bid, and listing our B100 in blend stock with petrol diesel. So when you do that, you also want to make sure that you have a quality diesel spec with that, along with your B100 spec, and that's what this 7467 will do within that standard for B6 and B20 blends. So making sure that you put that into your specs when you're going out to bid, or whether you're going to purchase the your fuel products at. A lot of fleets don't know that, but some of the diesel fuel that they're getting dropped at their tanks already have B5 into it. And the reason why they're using B5 into that, or the bio product into it, because of the lubrication or lubricity that is added into it when they took out the low sulfur fuel. So it added the lubrication back into the diesel fuel that's needed inside the injection systems. Next slide, please. The environmental aspects of this. Being a diverse fuel, okay, and Helena talked about this with the soybeans and canola and other plants and animal fats that's into it. We don't allow recycled grease into ours. That's one thing we put into it, because it might be into a glycerin problem later on. But this is just some of the things into it. Again, this is on greenhouse gases that it reduces. And it definitely lowers a particular matter by 47%, reducing the smog. So if you would see a city vehicle, you won't see the black smoke rolling out of it. If it is rolling out of it, then we definitely have a unit that has mechanical issues inside the motor, and you won't see that side of it. And I gotta say though, if it goes into a regen mode, you can see some white steam coming out of it, and some people get that mixed up with that side of it. The other side, it reduces the hydrocarbon emissions, okay, by 67%. Next slide, please. The first thing when you start to use B20 or using any bio product into it is making sure that you get your tanks cleaned. And I hope you'll have a fuel management program that you're having them clean at least once or twice a year. I know we're on a management program here that's done. Our gas and diesel is done, and filters change regularly at the pumps. So we do not have problems going into our vehicles throughout the city. But cleaning of the storage tanks underground or above ground, because the B100 is it's a cleaning product. You can actually use it straight as a penetrating oil, and it will cut the rust. So it will clean your tanks, and it will clean the tanks inside your equipment, whether it's your trucks or construction equipment. And I actually will start making it look, if you would look at your fuel filter, sometimes they could look black because of what it has done and cleaned up the tanks and so forth into it. When we had our tanks cleaned here at the city, it was around a $2,000 mark, okay, to have it cleaned, and any of the disposal or anything of that matter to clean it up. And then we did not jump into B20 all the way. We did it gradually, so it would be a cleaning product throughout within the trucks and construction equipments and fire trucks. And that would be, we started with B5, and we ran that a couple loads, which we go through 7,500 gallons a week. So we ran B5 for a couple weeks, and then we ran B10 for a couple weeks, and then we finally transitioned over to B20. And again, it worked as a cleaning agency. And if we had some issues with some older equipment where it really cleaned it up, and we had some leakage on some older injection pumps, but that's the only problems we had. And once those was resealed, we was good to go with it. So again, as talking about, it can leave deposits left by diesel fuel in the fuel tank, and we made sure that we had fuel filters on hand that we could change out onto any of the trucks if we had that. But once we got through that initial startup, we didn't have any more fuel filter issues throughout our fleet. Next slide, please. At the beginning of this, or probably midway when they did away with the low sulfur fuel, we did have issues in the winter with a glycerin problem, okay, and it separated, and it came out that it was the chemical product that was being used in the diesel fuel, not in B100, but was in the diesel fuel product, and the two separated, and you could literally just shake it up and it would come back to a fuel, but it would become to a solid state. So we experimented with putting it in the freezer a lot and so forth, and with our fuel provider, and we got it with the chemicals and stuff, so it was straightened out. But that was our only problem that we ever really had, but it was a cold winter also. One thing about that is we also have fuel heaters on all of our trucks, so it doesn't matter what temperature it is out there, because our trucks have to run no matter how cold it is. We don't get school delays like some like schools do or anything like that. We have to be out there, but the other side of it, we only have 2 people that would be cold, not a whole busload of kids. So again, that's important to us, is being able to keep our fleet on the road at any temperature. The biggest thing the drivers could tell you if a lack of power because of a plugged fuel filter, and if that was going on. But again, we only had a few of those throughout the time that we switched over into that side of it, because we have a pretty good fleet program, of maintenance program of changing and servicing our vehicles throughout. The other thing you want to make sure of is making sure you don't get a bacteria in your fuel storage system, and that side of it is when you're putting a piece of equipment up for the year, is making sure that you're putting an additive into it, and that you're putting very little additive into it, fuel stabilizer, and we do that whether it's gas or diesel. But the other thing of it is topping off that tank of that piece of equipment so it doesn't draw moisture from the warm weather and then cooling back down and back and forth, and it can draw condensation. And we don't have any problems then at the startup at the next season. Next slide, please. Managing with your partners, okay? Again, we talked a little bit about using a quality B100 product, okay? Making sure your fuel meets them standards, okay? And put that 6751 right into there. The other thing of it is look at how's it manufactured. And so making sure you put in your spec the BQ 9000 certified producer, and that is out there. Our local state provider of Louis Dreyfus is a BQ 9000 certified. The other thing that we found into it is make sure your fuel, and write this in your spec, that it's injected and blended when they're getting their tanker load at the terminals. If you're doing a splash blended, what happens is they'll load the B100 first, and then they'll go back and load the diesel product into your tank, and they're hoping it mixes up going down the road, or when they're dumping it into your tank, that it gets totally mixed up. Well, it does not always do that, and you could get a big slug of B100, or it could be B70 or anything like that. And we did some testing onto this side of it, and we had trucks running around with B80 in it. We had one with B100. The trucks still ran fine, okay? So it gives us a good idea that we could go to a higher product into that side of it, but that was also in warmer weather when we was doing that. And that's when we went to making our terminal to do injection blended, so it's blended the whole time that it is loading into the tanker. The other extra level certification, okay, all this is part of the National Bio Board that's all put together and making sure that's worked hard on all this. Next slide, please. Again, I touched a little bit about this, was the seasonal equipment, fill up the seasonal equipment before storing it for the winter, putting a little bit of fuel additive. We use a product called Stable, and it makes it a lot easier, no problems in the startup for the next season. Next slide, please. And that should conclude for myself.
Thank you, Larry, for providing that great content about your experience using biodiesel in your fleet. I know you covered a lot of really good content and details, so I do want to give a chance for the people who are tuned in today to ask you some questions. So just as a reminder, guys, that lovely panel here that GoToWebinar provides, you can type a message, or there's an actual question box where you can type some questions. Yeah, Larry, how long have you been the fleet director for the city of Fort Wayne?
Oh, since 2003, June of 2003, so 17 years. It's gone by fast.
Yeah. And have you gradually increased the number of vehicles in fleet, or has that stayed kind of the same?
The fleet has increased, and some of us, I call it fleet creep, by us not disposing of the equipment properly or when it was being replaced. But our biggest thing is why our fleet has increased since I started here, okay, and it's increased over about 800 vehicles at least, okay, probably closer to 1,000, but that's due to our fleet department, or our police department has increased tremendously. We got 4 more fire stations in Fort Wayne since I've been here, and that's due to annexation and stuff that's come onto it. So every time we annex, the city has annexed, you need to add the equipment to be able to take on the extra square miles that we're annexing in, and to serve the public properly.
Right. Thank you. I'm not seeing anything come from the audience, so I think we can, like, you and Helena both looked out. Like, no hardball questions coming at you. So thank you again.
Hey, Kerri.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up on your original question, I had thrown out the age of our organization. It's because I was a little confused. So 1991 is our original start date for Indiana Soybean Alliance, but we had done a couple of mergers and name change. In 2007 is when we combined different soybean board and councils in the association. And so apologies for that delay, but yeah, so it's been over 50 years, and but yeah, so 2007 officially Indiana Soybean Alliance. So, but 1991. I want to make sure I do that to you.
Thank you. No, that was good. Did our speakers have anything else they wanted to mention before we go into the last part of the presentation?
Alana, I remember when that happened, okay? I was going to say something, but I thought, no, I might be wrong. But I do remember that summer of 2007 when all that was joined together onto that. And I think at the time it was Governor Mike Pence that had even was a speaker at that event, or was running for governor at that time.
Oh, wow. Come a long way.
Yeah, we was on a panel together.
Then you're still doing more panels.
Yes.
Well, thank you both. This has been good. If anyone, both of our speakers have given their contact information, and if by some chance you happen to misplace this, you can always contact me at Greater Indiana Clean Cities. So thank you both again. I think we're going to go ahead and move on to the last part, which is I'm going to briefly cover a biofuels infrastructure funding opportunity that came out here maybe like a month ago. This is the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced a grant funding opportunity under the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program. The program has $100 million in available funds for activities designed to expand the availability and sale of renewable fuels. USDA designated $86 million of the grant funds for implementation activities related to higher blends of ethanol fuel and $14 million for implementation activities related to higher blends of biodiesel. Funds will be made directly available to assist transportation fueling and biodiesel distribution facilities with converting to higher ethanol and biodiesel blends by sharing the costs related to and or offering sales incentives for the installation of fuel pumps, related equipment, and infrastructure. Applications for the program are due by August 13th, so that is just right around the corner. So hopefully most of you already know about this and are getting your proposals together, because most of these take quite a bit of time. But for more information, you can visit rd.usda.gov/HBIIP. And I highly recommend you at least check it out if you haven't. And that wraps us up. So thank you all for attending this webinar today to learn more about fueling infrastructure for government fleets, some best management practices, and the costs associated with biodiesel. Special thank you to our speakers, Helena and Larry, for giving us an overview of their programs and experience with biodiesel. Should anyone have any follow-ups or questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Kerri at Greater Indiana Clean Cities, at the contact information listed on this slide. Our website also has more information and resources, including signing up for our newsletter and a listing of upcoming events. Obviously, right now, we're in the same boat as everyone else where we can't hold in-person events. However, any events we do hold will be listed and promoted on all of our social media platforms as well as the website. And please remember to take our quick 2-minute survey that will be sent to you right at the end of this, so we can make sure we continue to plan webinars of value to our stakeholders. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.